The days are coming, declares the sovereign Lord, when I will send a famine through the land. Not a famine of food or a thirst for water, but a famine of hearing the words of the Lord. There comes a moment in the life of the chosen when heaven stops speaking in the way it used to. Not because you've sinned, not because you failed, but because something is shifting in the realm of the Spirit. And it doesn't come with thunder or warning. It doesn't come with a prophet standing at your door. It arrives in silence. You wake up one day and the things that once moved you now feel distant. The voices you used to run to no longer carry the same weight. The places where you used to feel God's presence now echo with stillness. And for a moment you wonder, did I miss something? But this is not punishment. This is transition. This is what it feels like when a spiritual contract is closing. Some changes are loud. Others come in whispers. But the most sacred shifts of your soul happen in silence. When God no longer allows the old connection to satisfy your spirit, not because you're being abandoned, but because you are being advanced. This silence is holy. You are not forgotten. You are being repositioned. And in this divine quiet, God is saying, I'm no longer feeding you the way I used to. I'm preparing your appetite for something deeper. You try to pray, but the words feel dry. You try to worship, but your heart is unmoved. You try to explain, but no one seems to understand. This is not depression. This is not spiritual failure. This is the sacred starvation of the chosen, when heaven shuts one faucet so another can open. And during this time, the chosen are tempted to panic, to question, to return to familiar places, looking for old feelings. But the famine is not an attack. It is a sign. It is God Himself calling you away from what was, to prepare you for what will be. In this space between what no longer feeds you and what has not yet begun, something eternal is being rewritten. You are walking through a hallway where one door has closed and another has not yet opened. And in that hallway, it feels like you are floating between worlds, invisible, misplaced, misunderstood. But you are not lost. You are being unbound. When God goes silent, it means the old season cannot teach you anymore. And you, chosen one, are no longer who you were. The silence is not absence. It's transformation. You don't cry because of pain. You cry because you feel something dying inside, and you don't have language for it. But heaven does. Heaven has already documented your transition in eternity's case files. You are not forgotten. You are being recorded, repositioned, and reborn. And when the noise of the world fades, that's when God begins to whisper again. So if you are in the famine, don't fear it. If you are in the quiet, don't fight it. If everything that once felt like home now feels like exile, don't run back, because the famine of sound is feeding your discernment. The silence of God is birthing your next mission. You are not who you were, and this silence is proof. You are standing in the holy hush between assignments. And the next time God speaks, the wind will shift, the doors will unlock, and the fire inside you will never go out again. But until then, honor the silence. Stay faithful in the famine. And remember, God doesn't go silent to punish. He goes silent to prepare. For He chose us in Him before the creation of the world to be holy and blameless in His sight. Before your body ever had a name, your soul had an assignment. Before you took your first breath on earth, your spirit signed an invisible agreement in eternity. The Bible doesn't call it a soul contract, but it shows us, through chosen lives like Joseph, Esther, Jeremiah, Paul, that long before people understood their calling with their mind, it was already written on their spirit. You weren't born randomly. You didn't stumble into this life, these struggles, these relationships, these battles. They were part of a divine blueprint, signed in the invisible. You agreed, Yes, you agreed. To walk through fire, to carry light, to awaken others, and to fulfill something on earth that could only be done through your unique pain, your unique voice, your unique journey. And because of that divine agreement, some people were placed on your path not to stay forever, but to fulfill a purpose. Some friends were never meant to last. Some relationships were never meant to end in forever. Some seasons were never designed to be permanent. They were assignments, spiritual contracts, mutual agreements between souls, even if the mind never understood. But here's the mystery of it all. When a soul contract is fulfilled, it ends silently. It doesn't always come with closure. It doesn't always come with clarity. It just ends. One day the connection fades, the energy shifts, the emotion dries up, and the person you used to feel tethered to becomes just someone. That's not betrayal. That's transition. It's your spirit saying, this contract has been fulfilled. And this is why the chosen struggle. They are loyal to the soul, not just the situation. They don't disconnect easily. But when the vibration changes, when the mission is done, even they can't force it to stay alive. And it hurts, not because something was wrong, but because something holy has ended. And there's no ceremony for that. No one teaches us how to grieve soul contracts. But the Bible gives us glimpses. When Elijah had to release Elisha, when Jesus had to let Judas leave, when Paul and Barnabas had to part ways. Not every separation was a failure. Some were simply the expiration of purpose. And the chosen must learn to discern when loyalty becomes bondage. You are not called to hold on to what heaven has already released. You are not meant to keep feeding what God has already fulfilled. There is a sacred freedom in letting go when the contract ends. Because until you release what was, you can't receive what will be. This is why your heart feels torn, not because you are weak, but because you are awake. Your soul remembers the vow. Your soul knows when the time has come. And when the season is over, heaven whispers, you did well. The purpose has been completed. Now let me realign your path. So if you're feeling the weight of unexplained distance, if you're sensing a sacred unraveling, don't chase what's slipping away. Honor the soul contract, release it with peace, and make room for your next divine assignment. Because the chosen don't cling to people, they cling to purpose. I will give you a new heart and put a new spirit in you. I will remove from you your heart of stone and give you a heart of flesh. There's a moment in the walk of the chosen where everything begins to lose its flavor. It doesn't happen all at once. It creeps in slowly. You find yourself rereading old messages, but feeling no connection. You walk into places that once pulsed with joy, but now feel hollow. You see people who once set your soul on fire, but now feel like background noise. And the worst part? You can't explain it. There was no fight, no betrayal, no offense. But your spirit knows this part is done. The hardest endings are the ones that don't come with a reason. The ones where everything on the outside still looks the same, but inside the vibration has vanished. You try to reignite it. You replay old conversations. You revisit the memories. You force yourself to laugh, to engage, to care. But your soul isn't responding. Why? Because the contract is complete. And when heaven closes a cycle, the heart starts to unplug before the mind catches up. You're not cold. You're not broken. You're being rewired. What once moved you no longer stirs you because God is changing your frequency. The chosen feel this more deeply than others. Why? Because they live by spiritual resonance, not surface routines. They need connection, meaning, presence. They can't fake what their soul no longer affirms. And when the frequency shifts, they are forced to face a holy discomfort. Everything that used to feel right now feels neutral. And that's the moment when the soul begins to whisper, we've outgrown this. This is no longer aligned. It's not disrespectful. It's not ungrateful. It's not selfish. It's completion. But because the world doesn't teach us how to honor completions, we internalize it as confusion, as guilt, as failure. You start asking yourself, why am I pulling away? Why don't I feel what I used to feel? Am I changing too much? And the answer is, yes, you are changing, but not randomly. You are evolving. You are shifting from one spiritual assignment to another. And that requires space. Space that the old connections can no longer fill. If you try to stay, you'll feel fatigue. If you try to force it, you'll feel grief. If you try to explain it, they won't understand. Because this is not a mental choice, this is a soul shift. Let your silence speak. Let your stillness testify. Because the ending is not a rejection, it is a realignment. And if you resist it, you will miss the door that's opening just beyond the one that's closing. This is why Jesus often withdrew. Not because he didn't love, but because the next miracle required a different atmosphere. And so it is with you. When nothing resonates anymore, it is not loss, it is preparation. God is preparing you for something that the old cannot carry. So don't panic when your soul stops responding. Instead, pause and listen. That quiet, that numbness, that disinterest, it's not emptiness. It's God making space for something eternally new. Since we live by the Spirit, let us keep in step with the Spirit. There is a holy ache that visits the chosen when their soul has already departed, but their body is still present. You show up, you smile, you engage. But deep down, you know, you're no longer there. You are participating in routines that no longer nourish your spirit. You are trying to revive conversations that once gave life, but now echo with silence. You are surrounded by people, but your soul stands at a distance, like someone watching from another realm. You try to stay present, but everything feels like a memory. Why? Because your spirit has already shifted frequencies. Your inner world has changed, but your outer world hasn't caught up yet. And this is one of the most disorienting seasons for the chosen, because the body wants to remain where it's comfortable, the emotions want to stay where it's familiar, but the soul is saying it's time to go, and the tension between the body and the spirit becomes unbearable. You feel torn. You're not doing anything wrong, but you're no longer doing what's right for this version of you. The old connections become noise. The old habits become heavy. The old spaces become suffocating. And even if nothing dramatic happens, you feel it. You sense that staying is now more dangerous than leaving, because every moment you delay obedience, the weight of disobedience grows heavier. And the chosen cannot afford to ignore that pull, because their life is governed by assignment, not attachment. It happened to Abraham. God told him, "Leave your country, your father's house, and go to the land I will show you." He had no map, no destination, just a holy pull. It happened to Elijah. God said, "Get up, leave the brook, go to Zarephath. I've commanded someone else to sustain you there." The old provision dried up. Why? Because the soul had moved on. It even happened to Jesus. When his hour came, the Garden of Gethsemane shook with the agony of a soul fully surrendered, but a body still feeling the weight of flesh. He said, "The spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak." The chosen know this war too well, and many times the delay is not demonic, it's emotional. We hesitate because we don't want to hurt people. We delay because we don't want to lose comfort. We stall because we don't fully trust what's next. But here's the truth. You cannot fulfill a new mission with old loyalties. And when your soul says, "It's time," staying becomes suffocation. That's why fatigue increases. That's why joy feels fake. That's why peace leaves. because you're trying to keep alive what heaven has already buried. And the longer you remain in expired places, the more your soul will grieve. So if you feel like you're stuck in a place you no longer recognize, if your heart keeps saying, this doesn't fit anymore, it's not rebellion, it's realignment. The Spirit has moved. Now your feet must follow. The body must obey what the Spirit already knows. Because every time you delay your exodus, you risk forfeiting your next encounter. Let go. Leave what no longer vibrates. Walk away from what your spirit has already outgrown. Because the next level of obedience unlocks the next realm of your calling. Let him sit alone in silence, for the Lord has laid it on him. There comes a time when God doesn't just ask you to move forward. He asks you to step back. Back from the noise, back from the people, back from the places that used to affirm you. And at first, it feels like rejection, but it's actually repositioning. You begin to lose the desire to explain yourself. You cancel plans without guilt. You start to crave silence like oxygen. This isn't depression. This isn't antisocial behavior. This is the call to isolation, not as punishment, but as preparation. Because every chosen one, before stepping into their next assignment, must enter the wilderness of silence. Moses had to leave the palace. Elijah had to flee to the cave. Jesus withdrew to desolate places, often without telling a soul. And why? Because some revelations don't come in crowds. Some identities aren't unlocked in company. Some destinies aren't conceived in conversation. They are birthed in stillness. God doesn't reposition you in public. He reshapes you in private. But the silence is strange. The absence of movement feels like death. You question everything. Why don't I want to be around anyone? Why do conversations feel so shallow now? Why do loud rooms make me want to disappear? Because your spirit is being tuned to a different frequency, and the old sounds now feel offensive to the new you. This is sacred ground. When God begins to pull you away, he's not trying to isolate you from love. He's trying to isolate you for clarity, because what's coming requires a version of you that cannot be influenced by noise, distraction, or emotional interference. The womb is always dark before it delivers something divine, and your isolation is not exile, it is incubation. God is speaking to you in the silence. He is stripping your dependencies. He is detoxing your attachments. He is refining your identity. This is the season where people think you've changed, and you have. This is where they misunderstand your absence, and they will. But you don't owe the world an explanation for your holy withdrawal. What God is doing inside of you is greater than what they can see around you. So let them talk. Let them wonder. Let them walk away. Because while they are trying to figure out what happened to you, God is resurrecting the version of you that was buried beneath people-pleasing, performance, and premature expectations. And when you reemerge, you will not explain. You will not justify. You will not apologize, because isolation was never punishment. It was elevation. And only those who honor the silence will carry the authority to speak into the next dimension. So if you feel alone, don't fight it. Be still, be silent, be ready. God has taken you aside, not to sideline you, but to seal something inside of you that no man can touch. Let him work, let him heal, let him rebuild. Because what comes next requires a solitude that only the chosen are willing to endure. He heals the brokenhearted and binds up their wounds. There's a pain that doesn't scream, it doesn't bleed, it doesn't show up in scans or diagnoses, but it lives in the muscles of your memory, in the marrow of your soul. And when a soul contract ends, when a divine season is closing, this hidden pain comes to the surface without warning. You could be folding laundry and suddenly your chest tightens. You're walking through a grocery aisle and your eyes fill with tears. You hear a song, a voice, a phrase, and something inside trembles. Not because you haven't healed, but because you're being emptied. This is not a breakdown. It is a sacred cleansing. You're not going backward, you're going through. Because your soul knows what your mind forgets. Before you can enter the new, you must release what still lingers in the old. When a soul contract closes, the echoes of past moments begin to rise, not to torment you, but to set you free. God brings them back, not for nostalgia, but for completion. He's saying, you buried this too quickly. You survived it, but you never healed it. Let me touch it now. Let me clean the margins. And so the memories come. The grief returns. The ache surfaces, not to break you, but to make you whole. You see, chosen ones carry deep emotional imprints. Their soul fills in layers, and every bond they create leaves a residue in their spirit. Even when the season is over, the soul needs a moment of mourning, not for what was lost, but for what has fulfilled its purpose. And this mourning doesn't look like what the world understands. It's not always loud. Sometimes it looks like sleeping more. Sometimes it looks like being quiet in conversations. Sometimes it's that blank stare into the distance, not because you're gone, but because your soul is processing a funeral no one can see. And that's okay. Grieve it. Feel it. Let the tears fall without needing a reason, because the release is not weakness, it is worship. It is how the chosen honor the sacred exit of something that once carried weight in their life. Jesus wept. David mourned. Jeremiah cried out. Even Paul admitted the burden of sorrow. So why do we try to pretend we're immune? God is not asking you to be perfect. He's asking you to be present with your pain, with your emotions, with your healing, because He cannot fill what you refuse to empty. And if you bypass the emotional memory, if you silence the grief, if you numb the ache, you carry that residue into the new season. And the new assignment deserves a clean altar. So let the fire burn what must go. Let the wind carry away what no longer fits. Let the waters of release baptize you again. You are not breaking. You are being purified. The groan of your soul is holy. The shaking in your chest is sacred. The unexplainable sadness is not irrational. It is deeply prophetic. It is the sound of a soul finishing its final breath before stepping into resurrection. So don't rush this. Let the release do its work, because when it's done, you will rise, not as who you were, but as who you were always meant to become. Then you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. For a long time, you thought it was just bad luck. The same pain in different costumes, the same lessons, just with new faces, the same heartbreak over and over again. You asked, why does this keep happening to me? You assumed it was your fault. You called it karma, a curse, a generational wound. But what it really was a classroom. And now, finally, the bell has rung. Because when a soul contract ends, so does the repetition it carried. The pattern breaks, the loop closes, the test is over. And yet, because repetition becomes familiar, its ending can feel unsettling. You were used to the pain. You were conditioned to the chaos. You expected the letdown. And now that it's quiet, your nervous system doesn't know how to rest. You start to question, why does peace feel unfamiliar? Why am I waiting for something to go wrong? Why am I afraid to trust this new space? Because you've been living in a spiritual loop, and now the loop has snapped. You didn't just survive something, you graduated from it. You've been released, not just from people, but from the need to repeat what hurt you. Because the chosen don't just go through seasons, they carry assignments. And every assignment comes with a spiritual mirror, showing you where you're healed, where you're whole, and where you're still in hiding. That person who triggered you, they weren't punishment. They were a revealer. a key. That delay? It wasn't random, it was a pause of mercy, a holy recalibration. That cycle? It had a deeper meaning. It was forcing you to confront the you were ignoring. But now, you're different. You respond differently. You choose differently. You walk away sooner. You speak up faster. You no longer tolerate what you used to manage. That's how you know the contract is over. It didn't end in fanfare. It ended in your posture, in your stillness, in your new level of clarity. That's the divine signature of spiritual maturity. You no longer need the storm to recognize the lesson. You don't need to be burned again to know the fire is hot. You don't need another heartbreak to know your heart is worth protecting. Because once you've embodied the truth, the pattern no longer has power. The chosen are never stuck. They are held until they learn. And once they learn, they are launched. So if life feels strangely quiet, like a long storm has finally passed, if the old triggers don't stir you, if the old games don't tempt you, rejoice. You're not being tested anymore. You passed. And now, the silence you feel isn't emptiness. It's the wide open space of freedom. It's the clearing where new instructions will soon arrive. It's the moment where God says, "You've walked the fire. You've faced the mirror. You've passed the trial. Now, come higher." So don't fear the end of the loop. Celebrate it. The cycle didn't break you. It built you. And what's coming next will require a stronger, wiser, freer version of you. And now, that version finally lives. And we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love him, who have been called according to his purpose. Some of the most profound endings in your life will not come with an explanation. No confrontation, no farewell speech, no final conversation. Just silence. One day someone is there, and the next they are not. You scroll past their name and feel nothing. You walk past the place you once called home and feel like a stranger. And the human in you wants to understand, why did they leave? What did I do wrong? Why didn't they say goodbye? But the soul already knows. The contract is over. The assignment is complete. The bond has fulfilled its purpose. And heaven doesn't always grant you closure, because heaven is not bound by human explanations. It is bound by eternal purposes. There are people who walk with you for a season, a mission, a divine moment. And when that moment has been completed, the connection dissolves. Not because of drama, not because of betrayal, but because the frequency has shifted, and no amount of texts, conversations, or effort can hold together what God has already released. For the chosen, this hits differently. You don't bond by convenience. You bond by purpose. And when purpose expires, it feels like the floor beneath your soul moves, but no one else notices. You mourn quietly. You miss deeply. You search for meaning, but often there is none, not on the surface, because the true meaning was already buried in the unseen. You connected with that person to awaken something, to reflect something, to finish something. And now, it is finished. And the most honoring thing you can do is let them go. No bitterness, no resentment, just release. Just as God brought them into your story without your control, He is allowed to remove them without your permission. And that is not cruelty, it is kindness. Because the people who leave silently are often the ones who would have become noise in your next season. Their purpose was tied to the version of you that no longer exists. And if you force their presence into your next level, you delay your own progress. Don't chase the ones who disappear. Don't fight for expired loyalties. Don't revive what heaven has concluded. Let the silence be the closure. Let the absence be the answer. Let the Spirit confirm what the mouth could not say. You are not being abandoned. You are being cleared. cleared for deeper relationships, cleared for greater assignments, cleared for divine alignment. And that space that once felt like loss, it will become sacred ground where new purpose will take root. So if someone left without warning, if something ended without explanation, take a deep breath, put your hand over your heart, and say, "Thank you, God. The mission is complete," because some separations aren't endings. They're graduations, and you don't need a party to know you've moved to a new level. All you need is the peace that follows the pain, the freedom that follows the release, the silence that feels like home. What no eye has seen, what no ear has heard, and what no human mind has conceived. The things God has prepared for those who love Him. These are the things God has revealed to us by His Spirit. Have you ever noticed the same number appear over and over again? Have you ever heard the same phrase whispered from different mouths in different moments? A song plays in the background. A stranger says something that echoes your inner thoughts. You open a book and read a line that stops your heart. You call it strange. You say, "That's weird." The world calls it coincidence, but heaven calls it communication. Because when you are walking through a spiritual transition, especially when a soul contract is closing or a new assignment is approaching, God starts speaking in code. He doesn't always use thunder. He doesn't always send prophets. Sometimes He speaks in repetition, not to confuse you, but to confirm you. When you are aligned with heaven's movement, you'll start to notice divine fingerprints on everything. You'll feel like the universe is talking. It is, but not the universe, the Creator. God uses the fabric of creation to whisper spiritual patterns, numbers that mirror your spirit's timeline, words that echo your private prayers, faces that return in seasons of destiny, dreams that carry warnings or instructions. And this is not new, it's deeply biblical. Joseph had prophetic dreams, patterns. Daniel interpreted symbols and visions, patterns. Jesus spoke in parables, layered divine codes. Why? Because heaven hides things for the hungry, and only those who are spiritually alert will notice that what the world calls coincidence is actually confirmation. You're not imagining it. That number you keep seeing, it's a marker. That repeated word or phrase, it's alignment. That strange delay or unexpected encounter, it's orchestration. When the soul completes a contract, the signs begin to shift. You'll notice that the things you used to see fade and new patterns emerge. And these patterns are not meant to entertain your curiosity. They're meant to prepare your faith. They're the gentle push of God saying, "You're not lost. You're not late. You're right where I want you. Keep watching." Because the new season doesn't begin with full clarity. It begins with small signs, holy nudges, spiritual breadcrumbs, echoes in the silence. And when you listen, when you follow the patterns, you step deeper into divine rhythm, into the flow of God's hidden design. So stop dismissing the repetitions. Stop ignoring the nudges. Stop doubting your discernment. Your soul recognizes what your mind has yet to name. And as you continue to release what has expired, heaven will continue to signal what's next. But these signals are subtle, and only the still will sense them. Only the surrendered will follow. So if you're seeing signs that defy logic, if the invisible feels more real than the visible, lean in. Ask the Spirit to reveal, because this is not imagination. This is invitation. An invitation into divine timing, an invitation into deeper revelation, an invitation into your next chapter, written in heaven, whispered through earth. See, I am doing a new thing. Now it springs up. Do you not perceive it? I am making a way in the wilderness and streams in the wasteland. It felt like loss. It looked like silence. It moved like the end of everything you understood. But this is not an ending. This is a rebirth, a sacred reset, a divine clearing, a holy interruption sent not to destroy you, but to rebuild you. The soul contract that dissolved, it made space. The silence you feared, it tuned your hearing. The grief that came without warning, it softened your spirit. The goodbye that never got spoken, it gave birth to a greater hello. God does not end anything without already having prepared what comes next. But He doesn't hand it to you in full light. He waits. He watches. He lets the noise fall away, the distractions scatter, the false comforts collapse, until you are left with one voice, His, until your spirit says, Lord, even in the wilderness, I know you're here. Because the wilderness is not a grave, it is a womb. And what's forming inside of you is not a return to who you were. It's the arrival of who you were always meant to be. The new mission is not a continuation of the old. It's built from different blueprints, breathed through different instructions, designed for a different version of you. The one who survived, the one who stayed, the one who kept walking when there was no map. You didn't fall apart. You were peeled back. The false layers were removed. The attachments were cut. The weight was released, and now you are light enough to rise, light enough to hear instructions you used to drown out, light enough to carry a word you used to avoid, light enough to go where heavy hearts cannot follow. This isn't the end of a story. This is the moment between tomb and resurrection. This is where the world says, it's over. But God says, watch what I resurrect. The chosen are not buried by endings. They are transformed by them. What people walked away from, heaven is now touching. What you wept over, heaven is now filling. What you let go of, heaven is now replacing. Not with replicas, but with revelation. So don't try to rebuild what God is trying to resurrect in a new form. Let Him be the architect of your next assignment. Let Him decide who walks with you now. Let Him write the next sentence, even if it starts with silence. Because the same God who allowed the contract to end is the one who's authoring the next covenant. And this time, it will not be temporary. This time, it will not drain you. This time, it will align with your calling, your frequency, and your future. Because the old you was loyal to your past, but the new you is aligned with eternity. And from this day forward, you walk differently. Not looking back, not doubting yourself, not begging for closure. You walk as one who knows the contract is fulfilled, the cycle is complete, the silence is sacred, and my new mission has begun. You are no longer who you were. You don't need to prove it. The oil on your life will say it for you. So rise, walk into the new. Not with fear, but with fire. The ashes are behind you. The altar is ahead, and heaven has already whispered, well done, faithful one. Now, step forward. This is not your ending. This is your unveiling.